Today in this video I am talking about snails and how you should consider using them in your aquarium if you want them. So the two main types of snails I'm talking about today are the red ram's horn, right there, and the Malaysian trumpet snail, which you can see just the tip of the shell sticking out right there. The other type of snail I'm going to mention real quick is the neurite snail. I had a small colony of about a dozen of neurite snails in this tank to start with. And while they did a fairly decent job at cleaning up algae, they didn't really do a great job. The reason why I started with neurite snails is because I didn't want to have an exploding colony of snails in my tank, because neurite snails, although they lay eggs, the eggs don't hatch unless they're in brackish water or salt water. I think technically it's just brackish water. So I don't like the neurite snails because they lay eggs all over everything. White specks all over the glass, all the plants, the rocks, the wood, everything gets covered in those white specks, and they're hard. So I chose not to replenish my supply of neurite snails because of that. So that's why I'm talking about the red ram's horn specifically here. It doesn't have to be a red ram's horn, but just a ram's horn snail and the Malaysian trumpet snails. Both of those snails will breed in fresh water. It doesn't have to be brackish water. They're going to lay eggs. The ram's horn snails are going to breed a lot. They're going to lay their eggs in little gel packets all over everything, and they will hatch and make new colony. So they're constantly replenishing themselves. You don't have to keep purchasing them. Same thing with the Malaysian trumpet snails, although the Malaysian trumpet snails, they don't really, they don't breed quite as prolifically as the ram's horn, mainly because they don't really breed asexually. As far as I know, they don't. They need male and female interaction, and then they kind of spread that way. But enough talk about the breeding and all that stuff. Red ram's horn, or just any kind of ram's horn snail, and Malaysian trumpet snails, they don't eat live plants. So if you keep a planted aquarium, the last thing you want is something like an apple snail eating all your soft tissue plants. I don't think they'll really eat anubias, but they might eat soft tissue plants. They might eat moss. You don't want that. So there's not a whole lot of choices for snails that leaves that, you know, at least for me, as to what kind of snail I want to have in my aquarium that takes care of algae. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this video, is algae specifically. So if you are going to buy snails to control your algae problem, you might want to consider figuring out why you're getting so much algae in your tank first before you decide to put snails in your tank to try to take care of your problem. The best thing you can do is keep your algae under control, and then consider putting snails in your tank. Now, you may already get snails in your tank called bloat snails, which come from the local fish store, and you know, they're already on plants, and you tend to get them, and they're basically pest snails. Some people like them, some people hate them. I've had them before. I do not like them because they're so small and they get all over everything. They get inside your filter. They can be kind of annoying, although they do a decent job of cleaning up the algae. I chose to go with the red ram's horn snails because, well, I like that they're red. But they don't eat live plants. They only eat necrotic tissue on the plants, and they take care of the algae pretty well. And I'll point it out to you here. The ram's horn snails in this tank, I don't have a lot yet because I've just put them in there, so they haven't really spread yet. But it won't take too long before they start getting all over everything. So anyways, you see this leaf right here? Nubius leaf? This one snail just did that in the past couple hours. Cleaned all that diatom algae off of that leaf. Now just imagine if you had a whole colony of them in here, of maybe 100 or so. Everything would be perfectly clean. But if you don't take care of your algae problem first and get it under a reasonable control, snails are not your answer. You need to really balance everything out before you decide to use snails as a cleanup crew. They're not the fix-all to everything. Although they do a really great job if you have a really huge colony of snails. Yeah, that's going to keep your algae under control. But for me, I've been trying to dial in my lighting and nutrient feeding schedule. Everything you do to this tank to keep a planted tank is going to get your algae out of balance. and you're going to have algae blooms, and you're going to, it's going to go through a process. So after that, the way that I figured out in doing it and keeping snails is by taking care of that first. And once the algae is under control and not like blooming or spreading and constantly becoming a problem, then you put the snails in there and then use them as a cleanup crew. Because if you get a snail that breeds asexually and breeds really fast, and you have an algae problem in your tank and you don't get that under control first, you're going to have a ton of snails in your tank, because they're going to have an environment that they can flourish in, and they're going to keep on breeding and laying eggs. If you take away the algae first, they're not going to breed quite as much, and you're going to have less of them in your tank, and they won't be a pest problem. So that's my advice to anyone who has an aquarium and are thinking about using snails to control their algae. And you want to make sure you choose the right type of snail for you, that works for you. I didn't want a snail that eat plants, and I wanted to go from neurite snails where you have to keep buying them. I wanted to get away from purchasing constantly and just having them replenish themselves. So the ramshorn snails, they take care of stuff on the surface. They clean your glass, they clean your plants, they clean the wood, the rocks, whatever. Everything that's pretty much visible on the surface, they take care of that. The Malaysian trumpet snails, I rarely ever see these guys on the glass or on the plants or anything. I mean, sometimes I'll see them on there, but 95% of the colony lives in the substrate during the day when the lights are on. They bury themselves in there. And at nighttime, they come out. But even at nighttime, I rarely ever see them on the glass or on the plants taking care of that. They just don't eat it. They don't eat this. They don't eat all the diatom algae or anything else that's on the plants. They don't even touch it. Maybe once in a while you might see them crawling on there, but they don't eat it. This patch over here, this is just an experimental patch. I cleaned everything. I left this here just to see what snails do. That was more of an experiment, so that's why that's there. But anyways, the Malaysian trumpet snails are awesome because they act like little bulldozers, bulldozing your substrate. Takes all that detritus and everything, stirs it into the substrate, gets oxygen flowing into the root areas of certain plants that are root feeders, kind of like my crypts back there. And they just constantly bulldoze this. If they weren't in here before, there would just be a thin layer of diatom brown algae growing on top of this. But since they're constantly going through and stirring it up, it's white. And all that organics can get down into the under part of the substrate, and the roots can absorb it. If you see that's a dwarf lily back there. I think that's what red dwarf lily. I think that's what it's called. It's been a while, but even down here you see these little leaves growing. You see the same thing. If those snails were in there, that would basically be suffocating in the sand. They won't grow very well at all. So they do a lot of great things. The Malaysian trumpet snails take care of the substrate very well. They're like the nature's bulldozers and rototillers. They just don't take care of a lot of stuff that's on the glass or anything else, and that's where the ramshorn snails come in. So I chose those two types of snails mainly because they don't eat the plants, for one. They have their own jobs to do, and they do those jobs very well. And they don't, and again, they don't eat the plants. So I just wanted to make this video to kind of help maybe some people out there who keep aquariums and are thinking about using snails as a cleanup crew for an algae problem that they might have. So if there's any more questions about this or any comments, leave it in the description or leave it in the comments below. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, hit that thumbs down twice. And we'll see you in the next one.